Every man carries a silent hunger to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be approved. It doesn't matter how strong he looks or how independent he claims to be. Deep inside, there is a part of him that wants someone else to say he is enough. This hunger begins quietly, but over time, it becomes a cage. A cage made not of bars, but of opinions. Validation feels harmless. It feels like support. It feels like encouragement. But the truth is darker. Validation slowly replaces your own voice with the voices of everyone else. You stop acting because you believe in the action and start acting because you believe someone might approve of it. And when that approval doesn't come, your strength collapses like it was never yours to begin with. Look at your life carefully. How many times have you paused before making a decision because you wondered what others would think? How many good ideas died in your mind because you feared someone might laugh? How many dreams did you bury quietly because no one supported them loudly? This is validation's first trap. It makes you depend on people who are not living your life. Nothing steals a man's fire faster than waiting for someone else to approve it. And yet, most men live that way. They look for applause before they take a step. They look for permission before they pursue a goal. They look for acceptance before they claim their identity. A man who needs to be understood will never rise, because rising requires standing alone. Validation becomes poison because it attaches your worth to reaction. If people praise you, you feel strong. If they stay silent, you feel weak. If they mock you, you feel worthless. Your entire identity shifts with the emotional weather of strangers. This is not living. This is servitude. The world around you feeds this trap. Social approval, likes, comments, applause, attention, instant reaction becomes currency, and men trade their authenticity to earn it. Every time you crave validation, you shrink. Every time you bend to be liked, you break. Every time you let others decide your value, you forget your own. There is a reason validation feels good at first. It hits the same part of your brain that pleasure, reward, and emotional comfort trigger. It gives temporary relief from insecurity, but relief is not strength, and the comfort you gain is borrowed. It disappears the moment someone else stops giving it to you. And now you are addicted to their attention. This is why validation is more dangerous than failure. Failure teaches you. Validation sedates you. Failure reveals who you are. Validation buries who you are under layers of noise, approval, expectation, and dependency. Men do not build themselves through applause. They build themselves through the discipline no one sees. Validation weakens you quietly. You don't notice it at first. You think you're motivated. You think you're supported. You think you're inspired. But slowly, your spine bends. Your choices soften. Your courage fades. And you start living in a way that pleases the world instead of a way that strengthens your soul. A man controlled by validation is terrified of being misunderstood, terrified of being disliked, terrified of being alone. But here is the truth most men never learn. Being misunderstood never destroys you. Being ignored never destroys you. Being disliked never destroys you. What destroys you is abandoning your path to avoid these things. You do not need the world to cheer for you. You need to build yourself in silence. You need to fail without witnesses. You need to rise without applause. Because the strength you earn alone becomes the strength that no one can take away. Validation creates dependency. Silence creates identity. In this chapter, you are standing at the threshold of a truth you cannot unsee anymore. The man who chases approval never becomes himself. He becomes an echo, a copy, a reflection of expectation. But the man who breaks away from the need to be liked becomes something else entirely: dangerous, focused, self-forged. In Chapter 2, you will confront the collapse, the internal breaking that happens when your life is built on external validation. Only by facing that collapse can you begin to rebuild on a foundation that cannot be shaken by anyone's opinion. There is a moment in every man's life when the weight of seeking approval begins to crush him. Not physically, but internally. A collapse so quiet that no one else sees it, yet so heavy that it bends the entire direction of his existence. This collapse is not failure, it is exposure. It reveals the truth you've avoided for years. At first, you don't notice it. You move through life waiting for reactions, waiting for signs, waiting for someone to validate what you already know you should be doing. But every time silence greets you instead of approval, a small part of you cracks. And these cracks accumulate, not loudly, but relentlessly. You begin to feel it in simple moments. You complete something difficult, and it feels empty because no one clapped. You make progress, and it feels meaningless because no one noticed. You speak your truth, and immediately regret it because someone disapproved. This is the slow breaking of a man who lives through the eyes of others. The collapse deepens when your identity becomes tied to external reaction. Suddenly, every decision feels heavy. Every action feels risky. Every attempt feels dangerous. Not because the work is hard, but because the judgment feels unbearable. Validation has rewired you to fear disappointment more than failure, and perception more than reality. Then comes the darkest part. You begin to lose yourself. Your desires blur. Your opinions soften. Your voice quiets. Your confidence dissolves. You stop knowing what you actually want because your mind is too busy imagining what others expect. This is the internal collapse, the death of authenticity. Validation creates a man who cannot stand alone, a man who cannot speak without permission, a man who cannot move without reassurance, a man who cannot think without the fear of being misunderstood. This dependence eats away at your strength piece by piece until nothing remains except a shell shaped by other people's preferences. Most men never confront this collapse because confrontation is painful. It forces honesty. It forces responsibility. It forces you to admit that the life you are living is not truly yours. You shaped it for an audience you were never meant to please. You gave your power to opinions that never mattered. This moment of realization is terrifying and liberating, because collapse is not the end of a man. Collapse is the beginning of self-awareness. Before you can choose struggle, before you can walk the harder path, before you can build inner strength, you must first face the weakness you've been hiding from. This confrontation is the first step into the fire. You begin asking real questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly want when no one is judging? What would I pursue if I stopped needing approval? These questions burn. They expose the parts of you that have been starving under years of pretending. But in that exposure, something awakens. The man inside you, the one you abandoned to fit expectations, begins to stir. He is not soft. He is not cautious. He is not dependent on being seen. He does not move for applause. He moves for truth. And when you feel him coming back to life, you realize how long you've been living as a smaller version of yourself. This confrontation with self is violent. It breaks illusions. It tears down excuses. It forces you to face your own role in your suffering. But a man cannot rebuild until he admits what he is allowed. And validation is something you allowed to control you. No one forced it. You surrendered. Now you must reclaim. The collapse hurts. It must. Because the pain is what wakes you up. It is the strike of the forge against who you used to be. It is the heat that melts the version of yourself built on approval. And when this chapter ends, you will know this truth. The collapse is not your enemy. The collapse is your invitation to rebuild. In Chapter 3, you will discover the root truth, the real reason validation controls you, the hidden mechanism that keeps you chasing eyes instead of chasing purpose. Only by understanding this root can you cut it out and finally become your own source of direction. Every trap has a root, and validation's root is older than you think. It reaches back to the earliest moments of your life, moments you barely remember, yet moments that shape the way you breathe, speak, and act today. You were taught, quietly and consistently, that approval equals safety, and disapproval equals danger. And this belief has been running your life without your permission. As a child, approval meant acceptance. Acceptance meant belonging. Belonging meant survival. Your brain learned this long before you had any say in it. So every time someone praised you, your body relaxed. And every time someone criticized you, your body tensed. You never questioned it, because children don't question meaning. They absorb it, and they build their identity around it. This conditioning stayed with you as you grew. It shaped how you responded to disappointment, rejection, silence, and judgment. You learned to equate approval with worth, not because you chose it, but because it was the first form of emotional currency you ever understood. But here is the truth most men never face. What kept you safe as a child is destroying you as an adult. Validation protected you once. Now it imprisons you. Because a man who still seeks the approval he needed as a boy never truly becomes a man. Validation traps you because it targets the deepest part of your psychology, the part that fears abandonment, the part that fears invisibility, the part that fears disconnection. When you chase validation, you're not chasing praise. You're chasing a feeling you were trained to rely on, a feeling that once meant safety. This is why you struggle to act without being seen. This is why silence feels heavy. This is why disapproval cuts deeper than it should. Your nervous system still believes that losing approval means losing stability. So you bend, you shrink, you hesitate, you soften. Not because you are weak, but because you were conditioned to survive that way. But here is the bitter truth. What you call survival is now self-sabotage. Validation doesn't protect you. It controls you. It keeps you tied to opinions that fluctuate. It keeps you shaped by voices that never mattered. It keeps you waiting for signals that were never yours to read. It keeps you small because small people are easier to approve of. A man who chases validation cannot live with intention. His actions are filtered through the imaginary eyes watching him. His goals are filtered through the fear of being judged for wanting them. His identity becomes fluid, shifting with every reaction, every comment, every moment of silence. This instability is the true cost of validation. And yet, there is another reason you remain stuck. Validation feels good. It feels warm. It feels reassuring. It gives you a sense of being seen in a world where attention is rare, but feelings are not facts. And the fact is this: anything that brings comfort without effort will eventually weaken you. Validation weakens your hunger. It kills your edge. It dulls your instinct to pursue growth, because the moment someone praises you, your brain relaxes, even if you haven't earned anything yet. Praise before effort ruins men. Praise after effort addicts men. And this cycle keeps you trapped between illusion and dependency. But the deepest root of all is this: you do not trust your own judgment. Not fully. Not consistently. Not enough. If you did, you wouldn't need validation. You wouldn't crave it. You wouldn't fall apart when it disappears. Validation fills the space where self-trust is missing. So if you want to break the trap, you must attack the root. You must relearn how to decide without applause, how to move without being seen, how to build without being praised, how to validate yourself so deeply that the world's approval becomes irrelevant. This is the beginning of true independence. In Chapter 4, you will learn the 3 principles that free a man from the trap of validation forever. Principles that are simple, unforgiving, and powerful enough to rebuild your identity from the inside out. This is where the shift begins. If you want to escape the trap of validation, you cannot rely on motivation. You cannot rely on inspiration. You cannot rely on willpower that fades when eyes are no longer watching. You need principles, simple, brutal, and non-negotiable. Principles that rebuild your identity from the inside so that no external opinion can shape it again. There are 3 of them. The first principle is this: you must learn to act without witnesses. Most men only move when someone can see them. They work hard when they know eyes are present. They try when they know approval is close. This is not strength. This is performance. A life lived on a stage is a life without authenticity. The strongest part of you only grows in silence. When no one is watching, the real you appears. Your discipline, your hunger, your honesty, your weakness. This is why silent work feels uncomfortable, because it exposes who you are without the mask. But this discomfort is exactly what you need. If you can move powerfully when no one sees you, validation loses its leverage. The second principle is this: you must replace approval with standards. A man who seeks approval asks, "Do they like this?" But a man who lives by standards asks, "Is this aligned with who I am?" Approval shifts with every mood, every face, every passing opinion. Standards stay. They anchor you when judgment comes, when praise comes, when silence comes. A man of standards cannot be bent. Standards rebuild identity. They give shape to the part of you that validation dissolved. When you commit to a standard, you commit to yourself. Not to applause, not to perception, not to praise. You act because the action is required of the man you aim to become. This removes the instability that validation created. This restores internal direction. The third principle is the hardest of all. You must learn to tolerate disapproval, not avoid it, not hide from it, not try to fix it. Tolerate it. Let it burn. Let it echo. Let it move through you without shaping you. A man who cannot handle disapproval cannot lead himself. He becomes a puppet to the emotional reactions of others. Disapproval is not a threat. It is a test. It reveals whether your path is yours or borrowed. If you break every time someone misunderstands you, you were never standing on your own ground. If you fold because a stranger disagrees, then your purpose was never rooted. Disapproval clarifies you. It cleans you. It cuts away weakness. It shows you how much of your identity still belongs to others. These 3 principles form the framework that frees any man from the trap of validation. Act without witnesses. Live by standards, not applause. Tolerate disapproval until it loses its power. These principles are not complicated, but they demand courage. They demand honesty. They demand responsibility. And that is why most men never apply them. Breaking validation is not an intellectual process. It is a behavioral one. You must recondition your mind through repetition. You must train your nervous system to stop reacting to external noise. Every day you act without being seen, the dependency weakens. Every day you choose standards over approval, your identity strengthens. Every day you let disapproval flow past you instead of stopping you, your internal stability grows. This framework is not meant to make life easier. It is meant to make you stronger. A man who no longer fears judgment becomes unstoppable. A man who no longer needs praise becomes grounded. A man who no longer bends for approval becomes fully himself. Validation may still whisper, but it can no longer command. If you commit to these three principles, you will feel something shift. Your decisions will sharpen. Your purpose will clarify. Your confidence will rise not from applause, but from alignment. You will begin to recognize the difference between who you are and who the world trained you to be. And in that recognition, you will find freedom. This freedom is not loud. It is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, like a flame burning steadily inside your chest. A flame that does not go out when the world is silent. A flame that does not flare only when eyes are watching. A flame that burns because you chose it, and because you keep choosing it regardless of who approves. In Chapter 5, you will see these principles in action. Real examples, real consequences, real transformation. Because principles are useless until they touch your behavior. The next chapter is where the framework becomes real. Validation is not just a concept. It is a pattern. A pattern woven deeply into the decisions you make, the risks you avoid, the words you choose, and the life you settle for. Understanding the trap is only the beginning. To break free, you must see how validation has shaped everything you do. Quietly, subtly, and consistently. Look at the man who refuses to start anything unless people approve first. He waits, he hesitates, he hides behind excuses, but underneath all of it is one truth. He is terrified of being seen trying. Because trying invites criticism, and criticism feels like a threat to his identity. So he does nothing. And he calls it being realistic. Or look at the man who cannot post his work unless the response is perfect. He checks comments. He checks reactions. He checks numbers as if those numbers determine his value. When the numbers are high, he feels alive. When the numbers are low, he collapses. Not because the work changed, but because the world didn't clap loud enough. Consider the man who stays in a job he hates because others think it looks respectable. He sacrifices years of his life to maintain an image that brings him no strength. But in his mind, leaving that job means disappointing the expectations of people who are not living his days, bearing his stress, or carrying his dreams. Validation keeps him chained to a life that drains him. Then there is the man who never speaks his mind. He filters every word. He avoids confrontation. He fears disagreement. Because somewhere in his past, approval became tied to keeping the peace. So he silences himself. He lets the world shape decisions that belong to him, and each time he stays quiet, a small part of him dies. Validation is also why some men overwork themselves, not for discipline, not for purpose, but for recognition. They grind endlessly for applause instead of improvement. Their work ethic is not driven by pride, but by emptiness, and emptiness is never satisfied. But the most tragic example is the man who never truly knows who he is. He mirrors the expectations of everyone around him, family, friends, society, until his identity dissolves into a shape that pleases all and fulfills none. He wakes up one day and realizes that the life he is living is not his. It is a collage of borrowed ambitions. These examples are not cliches. They are everyday realities for millions of men who think they are alone in their struggle. But this struggle is universal. Every man fights with validation. Every man feels the pull of approval. Every man faces the fear of being judged. Strong men simply learn to act anyway. So how do you break free? You start by seeing the pattern. You look at your choices with brutal honesty. You identify where validation has shaped you. You admit where you shrank yourself. You confront where you avoided action because you feared someone's reaction. Awareness is painful, but necessary. Then you practice the opposite behavior. You speak when you would have stayed quiet. You act when you would have hesitated. You refuse to wait for approval. You allow yourself to be misunderstood without collapsing. Every small reversal weakens the habit that validation built in you. Over time, you discover something unexpected. People's opinions stop carrying weight. Approval no longer feels necessary. Disapproval no longer feels fatal. You become stable, centered, grounded in your own choices. This is the beginning of internal freedom, the kind of freedom that cannot be taken from you because it was created by your own decisions. And then one day, you notice the shift. You move differently. You speak differently. You think differently. You choose differently. Because now, your actions are aligned with your standards, not the shifting expectations of the world around you. This is the moment when validation loses its power. In Chapter 6, you will learn exactly how to apply this in your daily life. Practical steps, daily behaviors, and actionable methods that turn independence from a concept into a way of being. This is where transformation becomes permanent. Understanding the trap of validation is not enough. If knowledge alone fixed this, you would have broken free years ago. Real change requires action. Cold, consistent, disciplined action. Performed in silence. Repeated until your nervous system learns a new way of being. In this chapter, you will learn how to do exactly that. The first step is to take back your decisions. Every day you make small choices based on imagined opinions. You dress a certain way. You avoid certain conversations. You hide your progress. You lower your ambition. These micro-choices are the chains of validation. To break them, you must consciously choose the option you would choose if no one were watching. This is not easy, but it is liberating. The second step is to build the habit of silent work. Work done without updates, without announcements, without proof. Most men cannot do this because they crave acknowledgement, but acknowledgement is the very thing that weakens them. Silent work forces you to build identity from effort, not applause. Commit to one thing you will improve privately, and watch your self-respect rebuild. The third step is to expose yourself deliberately to disapproval. Not to seek it, but to tolerate it. Say the truth even if it shakes the air. Take action even if people question it. Make choices that reflect your standards, not their comfort. Disapproval is only deadly to a man who fears it, but you are learning to endure it, and endurance is the birthplace of strength. The fourth step is to detach your emotions from public reaction. You must learn to observe judgment without absorbing it, to hear opinions without being shaped by them, to recognize compliments as pleasant but irrelevant, to see criticism as information but not identity. When you stop tying your worth to external response, validation loses its meaning. The fifth step is to create an internal standard that overrides everything else. Who are you trying to become? What behaviors align with that version of you? What choices strengthen him? What behaviors weaken him? When your standards are clear, you no longer need approval because your actions are guided by something deeper than praise. Alignment. The sixth step is to build a daily ritual of self-direction. Every morning, set one task that you will complete without telling anyone. Every evening, evaluate your day based on your standards, not how the world responded. This rewires your mind to find satisfaction in internal progress rather than external attention. Over time, this creates a stable identity immune to noise. The seventh step is to face the discomfort you've avoided. Validation softened you. It made you rehearse your words, hide your desires, and shrink to avoid judgment. Now you must move in the opposite direction. Have the difficult conversation. Take the uncertain action. Show up in places you fear being seen as imperfect. Discomfort is the forge that burns away your dependency. The 8th step is to practice completion without recognition. Finish tasks with no witnesses. Finish goals with no applause. Finish commitments with no audience. Completion without validation is the strongest form of discipline you can build. It tells your brain a new truth. I do what I say, not because others approve, but because I'm becoming a man I respect. The 9th step is to reduce your exposure to environments that feed validation addiction. This doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means disciplining your input. Too much comparison rots your confidence. Too much noise weakens your standards. Too much attention kills your authenticity. You must create digital and emotional boundaries that protect your identity as it reforms. The 10th step is to build momentum through small victories that only you witness. Strength grows through accumulation, not intensity. 5 minutes of honest effort matters more than an hour of performance. Every private victory rebuilds the internal foundation that validation eroded. Momentum becomes confidence. Confidence becomes direction. Direction becomes identity. If you follow these steps, something irreversible happens. You stop performing and start living. You stop waiting and start acting. You stop bending and start choosing. You stop needing and start becoming. Validation becomes irrelevant because you no longer depend on it to feel real. Your identity becomes self-forged, not crowd-created. In Chapter 7, you will enter the closing silence, the final part of this journey where validation loses its hold and you begin to rise as a man defined by his own standards. Not by applause, not by permission, not by the shifting approval of the world. This is where the transformation becomes unshakable. There comes a moment in every man's journey when the world grows quiet. Not because the noise has stopped, but because it no longer controls him. This silence is not emptiness. It is strength. It is the sound of a man who no longer needs to be seen, to be praised, to be validated to continue moving forward. You have walked through the collapse. You have confronted the truth. You have learned the principles. And now you feel the shift inside you. You feel the slow, steady burn of a man who acts because his actions align with who he is, not because someone else agrees. This is the transition from dependency to identity. Quiet, but irreversible. The silence around you is not loneliness, it is clarity. Clarity that frees you from the emotional turbulence that used to dictate your choices. Clarity that cuts through doubt the way fire cuts through metal. Clarity that tells you you no longer need permission to live your own life. This clarity is the beginning of true power. You start to notice that your mind feels lighter. Not because life is easier, it isn't, but because you stopped carrying the weight of other people's expectations. You walk differently. You decide differently. You hold yourself with a quiet confidence that comes only from one place: self-respect. The kind that does not depend on applause. A man who stops chasing validation begins to grow roots. He becomes grounded, unmoved, not stubborn, but stable. His emotions stop bending to every reaction. His decisions stop shaking under every opinion. His presence stops shrinking in the face of judgment. He becomes someone the world cannot easily influence or ignore. This stability creates distance between who you were and who you are becoming. The old you was fragile, easily shaken, easily controlled. The new you is forged, calm under pressure, cold under scrutiny, clear under chaos. This is the man who lives by standards, not by the shifting temperature of validation. You begin to understand one of the rarest truths. A man who does not need approval cannot be manipulated. You cannot bribe him with compliments. You cannot weaken him with criticism. You cannot distract him with attention. His direction comes from within, and the world has no leverage over someone like that. This is why strong men seem distant, not because they are emotionless, but because their emotions belong to them. They do not outsource their worth. They do not negotiate their identity. They do not shape themselves to impress people who are not walking their path. Validation becomes a whisper they no longer hear. As this silence grows, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in years. Freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be who you are without hesitation. You stop performing. You stop proving. You stop seeking. You start living. Fully, unapologetically, and independently. This transformation will not make your life easier. It will make you stronger. Stronger in the moments when you stand alone. Stronger when no one understands the path you've chosen. Stronger when silence is the only response you receive. But this strength is worth more than every compliment you once depended on. Because in this silence you discover something vital. The world's approval was never the foundation you needed. The foundation you needed is the one you are building now. A foundation forged in action, discipline, integrity, and self-respect. A foundation that no one can give you and no one can take away. You do not rise by being seen. You rise by becoming someone who does not fall when the world turns quiet. Someone who stands even when no one claps. Someone who knows that purpose is louder than praise and discipline is stronger than validation. This is the man you are becoming. Take a breath. Let the silence settle. Feel the weight that no longer controls you. Feel the freedom you once believed belonged to other men. You have stepped out of the trap. You have broken the chain. And now, your life belongs to you. In full. Forever.